This
Hi
is episode
guys.
2 of Dies Irae,
Two.
which
Okay,
finally
good.
happened after several centuries of waiting.
The
Before we get
second
and
started,
the last.
Sarah.
uh, which, Unlimited, you should get into the stream. Yeah, there you go. Before we get started, I just wanted to make two quick corrections to things that I said last episode that turned out to not be true. Uh, and those are all in the study guide if you guys have accessed that. It's still being updated. I think everything that I wanted to say is already typed in there, but it'll be updated by the time this episode comes out. Anyway, uh, two things that I wanted to correct from last episode from the exposition dump was that in fact Schreiber is not a real person. Uh, so that's out of the way. Number two thing I wanted to correct was Dies Irae, the name, does not mean the wrath of God. It means the day of wrath, uh, which still has to do with the wrath of God. It's an illusion. The original origin of the phrase Dies Irae is from the old Catholic song in the Requiem, which I think we did mention last time, which is about during the apocalypse, the day of the wrath of God, when uh, the the thing begins in earnest and the souls start rising to be judged. Um, this game is in fact somewhat about preparing humanity for a great transformation and ending in a new beginning. So I think it's an appropriate title. But yeah, that's it. Uh, to give an update to everybody that might be reading the study guide, I'm also like doing analysis of like all of uh,
Characters.
the characters, but also the incantations that they make. So the little verses that they say when they're doing magic, they all come from other texts. So I have a thing from each one of the ones that already showed up in uh, in the doc, but mostly they're coming from either opera, with Zamiel's coming from the Afreischütz. Mostly her character is a big reference to that, and Schreiber coming from both the Catholic hymnal and the Vulgate Latin Bible, which is delightfully blasphemous. But yeah, with that all in mind, I think we can start and actually get ready. We are not using any of these options because there's a specific route order that is strongly recommended by the game's writer and also by the translator, which we are going to be following for the first time
So,
in.
what is the first one?
Uh, well, you'll see, but we are going to be following that closely instead of opening up choice options like we usually do, just to be
Okay.
faithful to the greater narrative. But then again, the common route is very long, so we're not going to face any choices for any time soon. If only time could just stop. It was impossible to truly determine the single greatest moment of your life until you were looking back on things from your deathbed, of course. But I was sure everyone had wished for something similar at least once. It was only human to wish for fun times to continue, to want to relive a moment of glory. It felt only human to wish to hang on to the here and now. Even should its brilliance eventually fade, that still beat losing it. The known was comforting, the unknown terrifying. Everyone must have experienced this sort of anxiety before, especially students like me. It was hardly unusual to experience this sort of feeling. After all, we were at the part of our lives where we had to start thinking about college, getting a job, and just the future in general. We were in the uneasy transition period between childhood and adulthood, so it felt only natural we'd start obsessing with the mundane. One could call it living for the moment, a kind of escapism that arose when you didn't have both feet on the ground. Carpe diem, boys! For better or for worse, it was the sort of infection that didn't really do anyone any harm. You could just write it off as another facet of youth. But I didn't want to ever get over this particular strain of measles myself. After all, my
I
life up
think
to this point. Oh, go ahead.
I think they utilized the same dialogue in the anime, in the beginning of the in the anime. I remember something they talking about something like about the Carpe Diem. They didn't say the name Carpe Diem, but they were talking about living for the moment.
Right, and it's a recurring theme in the novel, so it's an important
Yeah,
kind of little phrase to keep track of.
I think this first part will be entirely about this.
Right. After all, my life up to this point had been more than comfortable. It might have been a boring, commonplace one, but I was fine with it continuing that way forever. If time flew when you were having fun, then the solution was simply not to have fun in the first place. It was best to steer away from the unknown and stick to the default path. Who knew what sort of trouble you might encounter on the road less traveled by? This is funny for Mapo and I, who are reading The Wheel of Time, because we were talking about how that novel was inspired by Lord of the Rings. And Lord of the Rings plays a lot with this in the beginning, where the hobbits, all they want is to have a normal life. But then they, like, unerringly get swept up in adventure. And it ends up being a positive change instead of something that they think is going to be, like, traumatizing and disruptive. So I wouldn't be surprised if Masato was, like, pulling from Lord of the Rings here. I was enamored enough of my current environment to actually entertain, more than just entertain, in fact, ridiculous notions like that. To turn one's back on the unknown and seek only the known. You could describe it as playing a game while looking at a walkthrough. That was my, Ren Fuji's, way of life. Always had been, and hopefully always would be. I figured that I could keep my internal sense of time set on slow if I kept this line of thinking. Stopping time completely was impossible, after all. So you could consider this philosophy of mine to be a kind of compromise, the closest possible realistic approach. I thought that I understood, that nothing lasted forever. That something being finite meant that its end could come at any time.
じゃあお前、例えば自分の人生を小説だと考えてみろ。
Up until the day where he had to go and say that.
漫画でもゲームでも何でもいいが、とにかく一人称語りで進む長編だ。自分をその主人公だと考えろ。
A story that continues from the cradle to the grave. An epic saga that details each and every event and person that comes into your life, from the minute to the monumental. Think of life as something like that, he said.
そこで質問。今自分が綴ってる小説は実際のとこ面白いのか？主人公としてお前はキャラが立ってるのか？
As far back as I could remember, Shido had a habit of suddenly going on and on about shit that didn't make sense like this. Most of the time, it was just to try to get a rise out of me.
文法が怪しいとか語彙が貧弱だとかそういうスキルのこと言ってんじゃない。ただドラマとして売りになりそうな花なりトゲなり毒なりを持っているか。さらに同じジャンルを囲った中でも抜きん出ている何かがあるか。自分がやらなくても他の誰かがやるような人生なら生き続ける意味はない。こんなところやそんなところで誰でもできるようなジャンルやっててもしゃあないだろ。連れとだべってバカやって女作ったり部活やったり悪くはないけど珍しくもない。そんなの日本中の同年代がリアルタイムで経験してる。俺は別に数が多いことをバカにしてるわけじゃないぜ。要はそれだけ選びやすい道だってことを言いたいのさ。選択肢があるように見せかけて実は人生一本道なのかもしれないってな。
In other words, what if we're not choosing, but instead being made to choose?
少なくともこの国じゃ最大公約数が強いだろ。出る杭は打たれる、天才は孤独、はぶられるバカ、いじめかっこ悪い。なんでもいいがよ。まあそれは現実的な解釈で理屈つけた場合の話で、俺はなんていうかな、デジャブるんだよ。これ前にもやったんじゃねえのかなって。楽しくないんだ。新鮮味がない。前にも読んだことある気がするんだ、この話。だから
With what?
フラグ立てとフラグを
And what was I supposed to?
言ってもわかんねえかもしれねえな。だってお前好きだろそれ。何もかもが基地の範疇、1から10まで同じことを生まれて死ぬまで繰り返したい。そんな変人他に知らんし。そもそも俺の話に出てくるお前はなんかずれてるトリックスターみたいなもんなんだよ。
And the trickster archetype thing is Jungian psychoanalysis term we're going to come back to eventually at some point.
It's funny. Sorry, you can keep
No,
going.
no, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna comment that the part in which he says about going around in circles until the day you die, it reminded me of something Nietzsche once wrote in his books, that we had to live our lives as if we were gonna relive them over and over again for all eternity, but we would forget.
Right, which is the theme of eternal recurrence, right? Which is kind of the thing of the novel, being that everything happens and then it happens again. And it's all the same with different furniture, right?
Yeah, but Nietzsche's take on that was to inspire you to live your life to the fullest.
Right.
To be the best you can be, so you could be it over and over again.
To not be irregular.
Right.
To break the cycle.
Which, I think this is a great introduction to the philosophy of the novel, because it is very Nietzschean in general, and I think you can get a flavor of that in the dialogue. But it does play around with all these concepts very frequently. I could have said the same about him myself. Shiro was the sort of guy that was impossible to read, impossible to get a handle on. He was a great cook, and he was in the archery club. You know? He certainly wasn't the type of character who should have been appearing in my story. So why did it sometimes feel like he was a central figure in it? If you were going with the whole novel analogy, Shiro was a misprint.
そんなお前をここでどかせば話が変わってくるかもしれない。中をすんなよ。お前だってわかるだろ。俺らはお互いガキの頃にいろんなもんから弾かれてる。本来なら気楽に学園ドラマやってられるような身分じゃないんだ。
This is like one of the iconic lines of DS Irae, I think, that I see like people quoting everywhere.
そして
This is one of the best lines that I've ever saw. Just not sure.
なのにデジャブが止まらない。挫折もんだよ。泣きたくなる。だから根性なくて悪いけどよ。俺は抜けるぜ。もう付き合わない。人生は短い。エンディングが来る前に選択肢の総当たりをやらせてくれ。この一本道、絶対どこかに別ルートがあるはずだ。俺はそれを探したい。
Oh my god. He's the top G?
He is. If it's something new, then it's worth checking it out either way.
だったらここでお前と切れるってのもなかなか面白いと思うだろ。
I had gotten sick of that grin on his face a long time ago. It was the sort of expression that seemed to say he had nary a care in the world. Fitting, really. That was how I knew that nothing I said would get to him. Not like I knew what he was going on about in the first place, really. But one thing was for certain. Shiro's genre or whatever was about to diverge completely from my own.
死んだら化けて出てくれよ。俺まだ幽霊見たことねえし。
So I was prepared for what came next.
There should be a route that you can go with the main character being Shiro, you know?
There should be. It would be quite fun.
Yeah.
Fist fights normally can't go too far. After all, you'd be using your actual hands and feet as weapons. If they got fucked up, you're done. It only made sense to call it a draw when you ran out of ammo, so to speak. Shiro and I were a little too stupid to let something like that stop us. You couldn't even really call it a fight. We were just both trying to obliterate each other, plain and simple. There was enough blood pouring down my face to make it look like I was viewing the world through a red veil. We smacked each other around so much that our hands themselves broke. We even had bones poking out of our skin, but we just kept at it. My eardrums had shattered long ago. I was lost in a world of noise and violence. My shoulder had dislocated itself, my chin was split in two, my ribs were bent and broken, piercing various internal organs for good measure. And here I was, hacking up blood like it was going out of style, but Shiro seemed to be having the time of his life. I couldn't focus on anything but the way he exploded with laughter. Why did it end up like this? Why did he need to take it this far?
だから言ってもわかんねえって。ただこの町に住んでいたら。
Couldn't remember what he said after that, no matter how hard I tried. All I knew was that we continued brutalizing each other until our bodies ceased to function. It wasn't a matter of one of us deciding to surrender or passing out or whatever. We just quite literally ran out of batteries. We had both taken too much abuse to keep our bodies going with sheer willpower alone. It was no laughing matter. Our battered bodies were just lying there on the rooftop, drowning in a pool of our own blood. We probably would have died if no one had found us. But what did Shiro say?
楽しいな。
Seriously, how the fuck could he act like that was just some sort of game? Listen to me,
こっちに
dumbass.
来たけりゃいつでも言えよ。
Don't act like you've triumphed over me, like you've gone on to the next level or whatever. Me? Come at you? Give me a fucking break. You're the one who needs to crawl out of the gutter and come at me, shithead. Left cheekbones, upper jawbone, lower jawbone, right eye fundus, nasal bones, all various degrees of fractured. Left collarbone, completely fractured. Upper left carpus and middle left hand bones, completely fractured. Right shoulder, dislocated. Right ulna, metacarpus, carpal bones, completely fractured. Ribs 3 and 4 on the right rib cage, completely fractured. Ribs 5 and 6 on the right rib cage, compound fractures.
Oh, I lost you to read this.
Yeah, I know, right? The med student is going crazy. Ribs 4 to 6 on the left rib cage, completely fractured. 7 and 8 of the left rib cage, compound fractures. Right femur, partially fractured. Right tibia, left fibula, both metatarsals, completely fractured. Not to mention all the various sprains, bruises, cuts, lacerations. In total, I had 48 damaged distinct locations.
How the hell did they do this? You know, like broke their feet, their hands, every single part of their body.
Yeah,
Basically.
they broke their heads, hands, feet, legs, arms, rib cage. Probably the only thing that didn't kill them was that they didn't have like spinal damage.
Yo, Zevlen,
Yeah,
they were under the effect of Survivor.
so true.
Yeah, but okay, but their hands and their feet were fractured. How the hell did they keep going? You know, and there was fracture in the oh, I forgot how to say this in English, but
The
it was
human will knows no
chest,
bounds,
below
my friend.
True.
okay, below the chest, which means they were giving each other punch that basically I think they could just knock out each other, because if we hit someone in the region below your chest, which
Right,
is
there's the solar plexus and that flexi.
yeah.
But yeah,
Whatever.
I mean, it's the. I think this is like part of DS Irae is talking about growing up. It's like a very symbolic analogy to like ceasing to be a child and growing into adulthood, and then all the old changeling the dreaming thing of like, well, we're going away from a realm in which everything is possible to the banal, sad, gray reality of being a normal person in like a society that has millions of normal people. And so like the fact that they're doing this kind of takes this fairy tale characteristic to it, right? Where they're like, it's their last try to like preserve that childish wonder. They're being heroes in each of their respective kind of stories to defend an ideal, and they just kind of got lost so much in that they ended up like doing absolutely ridiculous shit that would have gotten them killed otherwise. It looks stupid for normal people, but they're trying to preserve, to hold on to to that fraction of them that isn't yet banal. Even if then Fuji is trying to sell that he's trying to be normal, he's still a kid. His idea of normality is very romanticized. It's still idealistic, just a different flavor. It is interesting though that Shiro is like so intent on making his life mean something. And
He just don't want to be regular.
right, he's so intent on making anything worth it that he's willing to literally almost kill his best friend, you know, just to be different, because he thinks that there must be a way to not have to become a normal adult. He's
Yeah.
He would rather die than be someone, you know, just another somebody.
He fucking hates the society standards. He just wants to go for a different pathway.
Right.
He thinks like I think it was quite fun to hear he was saying like, oh, it is kind of boring to have to go to school. You know, you have the safety, security, whatever, and all you do it is continue with your day by day. And he was talking about this, and I was thinking about the top shit. For some reason, I thought it was quite similar. What they two talk, it is about going out of the regular state, of going out the regular standards of society.
Right.
It's a nice contrast to Nasu's works in general, because generally the characters in Nasu's works, they wish for this normal life for them, because for example, we have Castor, right?
Right.
She's in love with this man. Her life was basically horrible, and it was epic. It was horrible, right? It was a tragedy.
Right.
And then all she wants to do now is to be this normal guy, normal
Right.
wife, you know?
Yeah,
I
right.
think
Like
it's a nice
just like
contrast.
something detached from the weight of being a hero in an epic. But I do think
Yeah.
that Shiro is a believable, because I think everybody that's been a teenager that was like at the border of being in school and being in like college or looking for a job, especially people like us that like fiction, have like been at this moment where we've like called out, you know, like waiting out for a hero, that kind of thing, like being like, damn, is this really everything that I have in store for me? Just being a fucking office worker somewhere.
I haven't read this book, but I think it recalls to that work of fiction, The Death of a Salesman, I think.
Right, yeah.
Isn't it right?
Right, I have read that, and it does kind of remind me of that, where it's kind of like a tragedy in itself, the mining of potential, even if it's fictitious, like fantastical potential, and just like being crashing into reality as it's just routine. Every day is just routine, and then sometimes on the weekends you get to play video games for 2 hours before you go to sleep. It's an interesting thing. Of course, it's very extreme, but I think it's very relatable too.
Yeah.
If you listed it out like that, it sounded like I got in a fight with a dump truck or something. I was surprised I even made it to the hospital in one piece. To be honest, though, I would have been okay with dying. Isn't this fucking terrible? But it's true. I don't know, like sometimes when you have to to cope with like the reality that you're probably just gonna be another guy, and you're just gonna do things that everybody else does, it just kind of feels like, why am I even here? Someone else could fill in the role, and it'll be fine. You know?
Yeah.
Just a normal, just a normal life.
Right. It wasn't even that I had no regrets. I just kind of reached this zen state. Like, if I was going to die, so be it. Maybe it would be better to say that I just stopped caring. That fight had been enough excitement for one lifetime. I lost the will to do anything, barely paying attention to the world around me. I stopped giving a shit about myself either way. Despite my rather unhealthy mental state, my body recovered quickly enough to shock even the doctors attending me. More than a little ironic. Honestly, there was a part of me that wanted to laze around in that hospital a little longer, but I suppose there simply weren't enough beds to keep someone fully recovered lying around forever. The hospital staff told me that I needed to get out of there if I was well enough to be walking around. And this is interesting too, coming out of of that conversation, because you can say that being in the hospital. I think there's like a couple scenarios in House MD that are about this. Like being in the hospital makes you special, because even though being sick is miserable, when you're in the hospital, there's all these people that are looking out for you, right? Everybody's concerned because no one knows, like, oh, is he going to come out? Is he going to be okay? And so his desire to be in the hospital might really be his subconscious being like, well, actually, I want to do something. It's not that I don't care anymore. It's that I don't think that out there I will be able to make any of this worth it. But if I'm here, while they're looking for me and caring for me, I am being someone, right? I'm special in that kind of way, even if it's kind of sad. You see, he puts resistance to it. I really had no choice in the matter. If he did, he would just stay there, because it's better, you know? It's better than being out there and nobody giving a shit.
Yeah.
I wasn't a fan of the idea of someone who actually needed care being turned away because of my selfishness. It was for the best that I complied with the staff's request. Regardless of my feelings, the world would keep on turning. They said that time stopped for no man, after all. No turning back. What was done?
It's funny considering you were reading The Wheel of Time.
Right, yeah. Which is also about this in a large part. Go watch the podcast. Yeah. God damn it. That shit is good. What was done was done. Right now, the important thing was thinking about what would come next. Didn't matter whether or not I was capable of doing it. I had to face the fact that it was necessary, period. That was the only way I would ever be able to move forward. So I decided to walk out of there with a smile on my face, one way or another. I headed back to my room to pick up my things after taking care of the checkout procedure. Of course, the only real personal effects I had brought with me were some changes of clothes and an MD player. An MD player. Yeah, that's some real copyright protection there. I had spent 2 months in this hospital room, but I figured cleaning it up would probably only take around 5 minutes. It ended up taking 10, but hey, same difference. The extra 5 were a result of having to clean up all the junk that Kasumi brought in while visiting. There were various comics, novels, and even adult magazines. Seriously don't know what she was thinking of these. Scattered all over the place, more than a dozen in total. Get yourself a friend that brings you fucking shit. What's the name of that porn mag that's famous? With the bunny girls. Whatever.
With the bunny girls? I don't know.
Rather than dealing with them myself, I decided to just send them all back to their place.
じゃあ皆さん、お大事に。いや、あいつは今頃学校ですよ。来るとうるさくなるんで、一足先に。で。
The other patients in the same room made sure to get in a few last lighthearted jabs. I was never good at dealing with situations like this. I doubt anyone would call me the sociable type. Thanks to Kasumi, the other patients would often strike up conversations with me. It'd be awkward to just ignore them completely after all. My responses were always half-assed, but they didn't seem to mind. Hospitals generally had a gloomy atmosphere about them, so it was only natural that someone cheery like Kasumi would draw attention.
ならあいつの進路に看護師って選択も入れるように言っときますよ。
I took my bag and turned to leave. Playboy was the name of the magazine I was thinking of. But at that moment,
白ですか?
Shiro, being just as messed up as I was, had also been taken to this hospital. The bastard disappeared 3 days after his surgery. Hadn't been since.
知らないですね。あいつがどこで何してようと、 俺には関
Yeah, exactly. What Shido was up to was none of my business. I needed to stop worrying about his bullshit.
じゃあ
Stepped out of the hospital room, putting it all behind me once and for all. It had been months since I had last been outside of the hospital. The vast blue sky spread out invitingly above me. In the 2 months I had been hospitalized, autumn had turned to winter, and I suddenly became curious as to whether they were already putting up Christmas decorations downtown.
まあ遠回りなわけでもない
So
し
the Wheel of Time is Beltine. Beltine is coming. I decided it might be fun to experience my own version of the whole Rip Van Winkle experience. I needed a change of pace from the dull scenery I had been stuck staring at from the hospital window anyway. Just for reference, for anybody that might not know, Rip Van Winkle is this German fairy tale where there's a guy that sleeps under a tree for decades, and then he wakes up and he's an old man and everything's different. So this is what he's referencing here. Maybe this would help me get back into the swing of things.
って思ってたんだけどな
Unfortunately, even downtown, there was but the barest trace of Christmas spirit I had been expecting. It made me realize again just how laid-back Suwahara City really was. Suwahara was built back in the time of World War II. Despite being in an isolated location, it was nevertheless fairly prosperous thanks to the effort on the part of the big shots in charge of the place. Remember that they were talking about in the end of the prologue, the Shambhala in the east, the promised secret kingdom where Maitreya will rise and the new age of humanity is going to be initiated, right? So maybe the people that built this around the time of World War II were related to the guys that we saw in the prologue and their master plan. While Suwahara lacked in history and tradition and made up for in tourist attractions, there were any number of facilities to draw in crowds with, such as an amusement park that was famous nationwide. You could call it a small-town success story. Of course, I only moved there 2 years ago myself, so I wasn't really one to talk. I was definitely a fan of the landscape and the general atmosphere of the city, though. It seemed like a hectic place at the first glance, but things moved slower in Suwahara than one might think. Once you got used to it, it was as relaxing as a baby's cradle. Of course, most people would tell you the exact opposite, that Suwahara was a lively place with a bustling atmosphere, but I did know a few people who agreed with my assessment, such as Himuro and Shiro. It wasn't like you could really say that either line of thinking was right or wrong, though, and I didn't feel like trying to argue with people who disagreed. Live and let live, I guess. Anyway, my first foray into the city in 2 months didn't end up changing my impression of it much.
帰るか
In the end, I just came to the boring conclusion that it was the same city as ever. Right as I was about to head back. A piercing wail akin to the shrieking of a banshee rang out from behind me. So much for enjoying a quiet afternoon. It was at times like this that I questioned why I was even friends with this person. In the first place,
Okay, I was thinking he was gonna say it was time like this that I think Shiro is right.
in the first place, who would consider it a good idea to start yelling someone's name in the middle of the street like that?
お前ちょっと声でかすぎ
退院おめでとうねえどう元気かなもう痛いとこない何よその顔どうかした
I wanted nothing more than to tell her that yes, I was in a great deal of pain just now, as she had just wallowed me with something good on the shoulder, but I settled for just giving her a dirty look. This was Kasumi Ayase, my childhood friend of the same age. She was the head of the kendo club at our school. She was Taiga, but younger. As you can probably tell by this incident, she was rambunctious enough to have competed at the national level several times. And here she was, giving me the same wide smile as usual. I suppose this sort of upbeat attitude was one of her strengths.
お前なんでここにいるわけ
何よいちゃ悪いの
悪いっていうか不自然だろ
It was the middle of the day. Why wasn't she at school?
サボったのか？
まあね。
なんで？
なんででしょう。
Kinda.
Yeah,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah, you know, it's heaven in class, but
Not for me. I mean, you know.
you know.
Hell, if I knew, I threw up my hands.
私ね、一刻も早くレンちゃんに会いたかったの。
That's fine.
会いたかったの。会いたかったの。
ああ、そうなの。
He's such a fucking asshole, dude.
Literally, fuck it.
I was glad to see that her stupidity was in full form again today. What do you mean, bro? She's being nice.
留年希望か、お前。
大丈夫よ。あんたよりは私、日数足りてるし。
She said as she violently slapped me on the back. It hurt like a bitch.
とまあ、それはそれとして。あんた何一人で勝手に帰ってんのよ。迎えに行くって私言ったの覚えてないわけ？
いや、そりゃ覚えてたけど。
I wasn't exactly expecting her to skip school just come pick me up. It would have been a pain in the ass to wait around that long. I tried to explain my line of thinking, but Kasumi wasn't having any of it.
じゃああんた、後で電話とかする気だったの？
Definitely not.
っていうか、お前の番号って何番だっけ？
これだから全くこの野郎はよ。何ですか？君は携帯使えないんすか？いつの時代の人ですか？着信履歴の見方すらわからんお人なのですか？
失礼だな。それくらいわかるぞ。
じゃあ貸せこのクソ。
Kasumi snatched away my cell phone and began to tap away at lightning speed.
はい、電話帳のトップに入れといたからね。消したら怒るぞ。つうか閉めるぞ。
Damn.
笑顔で言うなよ。ところでこれなんだ？愛のヴィーナスって。
Damn.
あたし。
とりあえず京都のベルセルクに変えとくけどな。
変えんなっていうかそれ頭痛が痛いと同じレベルの重複表現。
It's not wrong.
それくらい強調したいんだよ。そもそもヴィーナス名乗るなら少しは女の子らしい言葉を使ってくれ。
誰が怒らせてると思ってんのよ、このバチ当たり。
I'm actually so.
Damn, bruh.
Oh. Oh.
That's brutal. What a takedown.
私の手とかがっしり握ってありがとうかすみ、君は僕の天使だよとか、そういう感謝の一つや二つって。ほらこっち見る。あんたいきなり大怪我して入院して、私心配して毎日お見舞い行ったのに、当の本人は
I hope there's a
勝手に
Kasumi
退院
route.
してこんなところを
There
フラフラ
definitely
してるか。
is.
何様ですか？
There is, but I didn't hope this.
And I think it's one of the first that we're gonna be going through. So
If I could guess, it is the first one
マジですか？やる気あ
that
る
are
か？
gonna
つうか
go
やん
through.
のかこら。
I'm not gonna spoil it.
I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna be the first one.
Kasumi seriously needed to cool it before she popped the vein. She was the one acting unreasonable here. Maybe she would calm down a bit if I actually did the whole my angel thing, but I really didn't feel like going through that.
そもそもあんたは
However, I did just have the thing to shut her up.
とりあえずお前が病室に持ち込んだ諸々は家の方に送っといたぞ。
はい。
捨てるわけにもいかないだろう。だから家に送ったんだよ。気が利くだろ。
I think it's quite funny because he lost so much his daily life that he was fighting for that he doesn't go to school.
Right.
But okay.
全部。
The comics, the books, and of course the magazines full of naked ladies.
その待って家ってどっちの方よ？
実家。
嘘！冗談だよね？
冗談は苦手だな。
マジで？
マジだ。
Wait a second, I think we need to pause. It would be a sad day indeed for Mrs. Ayase once she received that package and learned exactly what her daughter had been buying.
あんた最悪。
You just come
買う
back.
の恥ずかしかったのに。
じゃあ買 うなよ。
でもあのさ、役に立った？
Oh my fucking god. Now that you mentioned it, the other patients in the room with me had been big fans of those magazines. They didn't pester me while they were occupied with them, so I guess you could say that I did get some use of them after all.
そこそこ。
She tries too much. This is the only thing I want to say.
どんなやつだよ。
ねえちょっと具体的にどの号の何ページが役に立ったの？試しに言ってみなさいよ。
I think she just wants to say that she was in in those magazines, you know.
Right, yeah,
Oh.
exactly. That's
I
what's going
really
on.
want to make this choice.
It's we're going with a prescribed
No.
we're going with a prescribed thing for the route that we're doing first. So
Even this
What do you
choice?
mean? What do you
Even
mean
this choice?
prescribed fee?
Even this
I'm
choice?
telling you, these are like serious. There's some serious shit going on. Yeah,
Even this one! About
How
cosplay!
yeah, I don't know. Masada is a weirdo, and he has it programmed from the get-go.
Jesus.
私は別にいいけどね。
If we do come across a choice that doesn't have this gravity to it, I'll let you guys know. But this is prescribed, so.
とにかく怪我が治ってよかったじゃない。特にこことか。
She said, poking my cheeks with her thumb.
昨日まで大きい絆創膏してたから傷が残ってるのかと思ったよ。
Just one second.
ああ、これね。
Shiro had been wearing armor rings during our fight, so my cheeks were cut up to hell and back when I first entered the hospital. I didn't really care if it left scars or not, but Kasumi got so worked up over it that I was
Actually,
recovering. Yeah, go ahead.
one of the regions with the most neighbors. Can you help me, Zevlen? With the most neighbors.
What do you mean?
It is the face, in the region of teeth. And oh shit! I suck at this.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Can you help me? It is nervous. I forgot the word.
Nerves?
Nerves, yeah.
Nerves. Yeah,
Right.
nerves.
So it's one of the most sensitive, like painful
Yeah.
areas to get hit. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
But Kasumi got so worked up over it while I was recovering that I kept my face covered with bandages, just so she would shut up about it. Case in point,
せっかく綺麗な顔してるんだから傷が残ったらもったいないよね。
there were a few things I disliked more than being told that my face looked pretty. Back when I was a kid, I used to get mistaken for a girl all the time. Unpleasant memories, to say the least. And even as a teenager, it still happened from time to time, despite the fact that I was hardly short or anything. Scouts trying to recruit female models had called out to me on the street on more than one occasion. Definitely the kind of thing that dealt a blow to your pride as a man. That sounds to me like he has a fragile sense of masculinity. But who am I to critique Mr. Ren Fuji? I decided to let Kasumi have a piece of my mind.
わざわざ学校サボってそれだけ言いに来たのか、お前は。
退院おめでとうって？
ああ、他に用がないなら帰るぞ、俺は。
ああ、なにその言い方、可愛くないな。遊びたいなら遊びたいって言えばいいのに。
は？なんだそれ。
だからこのままデートとかしたくない？
I need a girl like this. Can someone find one and send it to me through the mail?
全然。
あ、いや。
Oh, I definitely wouldn't like a girl like this.
弟も帰ったらもう
Weak.
痛くも痒くもないんだもん。
Okay.
Weak. I wasn't sure I understood what was going on inside Kasumi's head at that moment, but it was probably for the best.
でもね、後でレアさんに何か言われたら全部あんたのせいにするからね。
何？
Why bring up Himuro here?
先輩がなんだって？
だから命令されたの。
Fuck yeah, boys.
She ordered me.
The hell? What on earth was she thinking?
それでお前はうなずいたわけ？
そりゃあだって
I was forced.
Oh, of course, it was put on me. I wouldn't describe Himuro as scary. I mean, she was the type that was a little hard to get a handle on, but still.
で、
レイは嫌なの？
嫌ってわけじゃないけどな。
It's that I didn't know where we'd even go. Like, just going to the amusement park with Kasumi didn't feel like anything special.
俺、大して金持ってないけど。
私もないわよ。
I was about to tell her that we should just forget about it, but Kasumi started suddenly fishing around in her bag.
でも大丈夫。先輩、その辺は卒のない人だから。
Where the fuck is this woman getting all this money? She finally pulled something out.
チケット2枚。準備万端でしょ？
Himono had provided us with tickets to the local museum, not exactly what you'd expect a teenager to pick. So did this mean that the whole date thing was already set in stone?
ほら、そいじゃ行くよ。
It does feel weird that there's someone manipulating these events. Like, sure, like, it's not unusual to, like, have a friend of a friend set you up with someone or something, but it is kind of weird that, like, this Himuro character ordered Kasumi to go on this date, gave her the tickets, the location, and everything. Like, this needs to happen. It feels kind of weird. It would seem the answer was yes.
けどお前、芸術に興味なんかあったっけ？
The museum was located far away from the main streets. While we were on our way there, I asked Kasumi something that had been on my mind. It wasn't a huge museum or anything, but it was a fancy sort of place that frequently held exhibitions for paintings, ceramics, and the like. Doesn't seem very Kasumi to me.
似合わないって？
どうだか。ただ先輩ならハマるかもな。
なんかそれ、私が非生産的なやつみたいで嫌なんですけど。
お前何か生産できたか？
料理作れるよ。
Was that really
Okay,
so
cool.
special? Not that I was one to talk. Cooking and me went together about as well as oil and water.
とりあえずお前の料理は置いといて、結局何がコンセプトの展示なんだよ。
見てわからない？
Damn, bruh. Kasumi flashed the tickets at me, a wicked gleam in her eye. Frankly, the text on the tickets was printed so large that it would have been impossible not to notice, but
If it's got something to do with World War II.
it's over. It's so over. I was still holding out hope that I was just seeing things, because if I wasn't, then it meant we were going straight to a gala featuring an assortment of objects I was not interested in seeing. Unfortunately,
世界の刀剣博物館。
ooh, that's something that I would like to go. Fuck Ren Fuji. Kick this motherfucker out of here. I want to go.
This is the best place to go.
This is Shiro Emiya is just gonna be there. He's gonna be the presenter.
Yeah.
My hopes were thoroughly crushed.
Oh. Oh, so this is the root of principal.
Right. This is like after the end of UBW when he's turning into Archer. It's great. This is
Yeah.
No
it is
way to treat
different then.
someone who just got out of the hospital.
Okay.
Eventually, we reached the museum, though Kasumi had to basically fight me tooth and nail the rest of the way there. I'd spare you the details for dragging me around the place after we got there. I prefer not to remember. And so,
ねえちょっと、いつまでそんな顔してるのよ。
Kasumi muttered in exasperation while looking at the Nepalese knife known as a hukuri. I couldn't help having a sour look on my face. The mere sights of these kinds of blades made me nauseous for as long as I could remember. Why did she take me here in the first place? She knew full well I wasn't good with sharp objects.
情けない
I
な。
wonder if there's like
別に噛みついてきたりし
some
ない
sort
の
of
に。
trauma or something
なんでそんなに嫌がるわけ？
that activates this aversion in him.
なんで釣られても。
Her tone was genuinely curious. Unfortunately, this wasn't something I had a clear answer for.
お前毛虫嫌いなのに理由があるか？
毛虫可愛いじゃん。なんかけなげで。
じゃあゴキブリは？
見つけたら叩いて潰すね。
ならヘビとかは？
巻きつけると気持ちよくない？ ひんやりしててさ。
Wonderful. I suppose I was wrong to expect a girlish response out of Kasumi in the first place.
なんか言った？
気にするな。
Whatever the case, these things just don't sit well with me. Little Miss Kendo over here might have found the blades on display fascinating, but I was definitely not having a good time.
もう一通り回ったし、そろそろいいだろ。帰らないか。
つまんないよ。デートでしょ。
お前俺とデートしても楽しくないだろ。
それはあんたの態度次第ね。
Love the old classic Japanese fiction standard of love yourself before you can love other people, where Irae has very bad self-love issues apparently. She was telling me this.
俺の態度は昔からこんなだろ。病み上がりなんだし、高いハードル持ってくるな。
ほんとしょうがないな。
Kasumi heaved a deep sigh. I was beginning to think that she actually understood, but
じゃあ最後にもう一回りして帰ろうか。
nope, of course she didn't. And so we ended up taking one more lap around the museum. I did my best to avoid looking directly at any of the blades on display. I wasn't sure I could really explain why I had this thing against blades, but it wasn't because I felt scared of them. Maybe they just weren't compatible with me. I didn't want to have anything to do with them, period. Just felt like mixing Rin Fuji and bladed weapons was a bad idea, like putting ketchup on a donut. Keeping my distance was the smart move if I wanted to maintain the peace and harmony in my life. In a way, they almost reminded me of Shiro. Shook my head, reminiscing about the guy was opposite of a productive activity. I was on a date? A date, after all. Worrying about Kasumi would be a better usage of my time. Not that I had much confidence in managing that either, but it would be a polite thing to do.
何？どうかした？
あ、いや。
That was a weird voice. Could have sworn I heard something. Was it just my imagination? So I really was hearing a voice coming from somewhere.
レン？
I strained my ears. The museum was quiet enough that it should have been easy to make out the voice I had heard, assuming it wasn't my imagination. It was coming from this direction.
ちょっと待ってよ。どこ行くの？
I
Is
ignored
she trying
Kasumi
to
and
say
ran.
murder?
Good question. I wasn't quite sure myself why I felt so compelled like this. There was no clear reason to concern myself over some voice in the distance. Either way, I found myself drawn to the spot the voice was coming from. Perhaps it would have been more accurate to say that I was guided there even. I found myself in an obscure corner of the museum, the sort of place you'd never come across if you were just taking the normal route through. Normally, you wouldn't think there would even be an exhibit piece somewhere out of the way like this, and yet there was.
Guillotine?
I was sure everyone had heard of a guillotine, the execution device used for beheadings. This exhibit wasn't an entire guillotine, though, just the blade used for the beheading itself. The blade before me distinguished itself from the rest of the exhibits by demonstrating a cold simplicity. There was nothing glamorous or decorative about it. This was a lump of steel designed for the sole purpose of beheading with ruthless efficiency. You would likely not find a more suitable tool for its task. Why was something like this even on display? It was a blade, yes, but it differed from anything else I had seen today on a fundamental level. It might have had a historic value, but it wasn't a weapon or implement of some ritual. More than anything, though, I wanted to know why I had found myself drawn to it.
何これ？私全然気づかなかったよ。
Kasumi had finally caught up with me. She took a glance at the guillotine from over my shoulder.
レン、よくこんなの見つけたね。何？ボイス。
ボワード・ジュスティス、正義の柱。ギロチンの正式名だよ。あとフランス語な。それからマクシミリアン・ロベスピエール、知ってるだろ。18世紀の政治家だけど。
恐怖政治の？
そう、
そいつに使ったものだって書いてる。
Robespierre was a key figure during the French Revolution, the men responsible for sending those opposed to the Reign of Terror to the guillotine. Ironically, his end would come by the same device he had employed upon so many of his political opponents in the bourgeoisie. This was supposed to be from back then?
なんかうさんくさいな。信憑性はなさそうだ。
でもそんな風に書かれてるとなんか嫌な感じだね。
同感だ。
Authenticity aside, the idea of putting something like this on display was simply in bad taste to begin with. How to put it? The whole thing felt too raw. The object on display here was a tool of execution, nothing more and nothing less. So perhaps it was natural that
これどれくらい殺したのかな。
one would find themselves asking that question, precisely because the lack of ornament present in the other exhibits made this nature as an implement of death apparent.
あまり不謹慎なこと考えるなよ。これは興味津々に拝むようなものじゃない。
そうだけどそもそも見つけたのはそっちじゃない。
誰だって嫌なものには敏感なんだよ。
Rivers of blood, screams echoing into the distance. All sorts of visions of death ran through my head when I looked at this thing. It wasn't often you found something that so clearly embodied the negative side, the original intent of a blade. Given that Robespierre's name was attached to it, it had to have been from the 18th century. If it really had been used during the French Revolution, it was safe to say that it had executed hundreds of people. Some would actually describe the guillotine as a merciful form of execution. It was designed to sever heads at exactly the right angle and velocity to ensure the criminals met with a swift, painless death. An instant death.
I mean, it sure is. It sure seems more merciful than having an executioner do it with his own hands, you know?
Right. But it's funny, I don't know if they're going to play with this, but the thing about the guillotine is that it cut so cleanly that oftentimes it took a little while for the brain to turn off because of the vacuum created in the blood vessels. And so you would have weird phenomena like the heads blinking and stuff after they were severed. So it was a weird kind of like it was exchanging pain for torture, you could say. An instant death delivered at lightning speed. There was a reason some called it merciful. It's easy to get the wrong impression from the rivers of blood and mutilated corpses the guillotine produced, but for some facing execution it was probably far better than being hanged. Well, assuming that the victim died before they had a chance to feel the pain of being decapitated, that is. I found myself thinking about exactly the sort of thing I had just told Kasumi not to.
行こう。正直気分が悪くなってきた。
そうだね。ごめん、顔色悪いけど大丈夫？
平気だよ。別に体調が悪いわけじゃ。
Before I could get to the word ill out,
あなた、同じ。
I heard the voice from the earlier again, more clearly than ever.
彼と同じ。あなたも同じ。
Why did I react the way I did? If only I hadn't paid attention. If only I had ignored it. If only I hadn't looked at it. If only I hadn't spun around to face that dreaded blade.
Yes.
I would have never had to hear the cursed words borne forth
The
from
best
the
hero.
ethereal figure standing in front of the guillotine. How could she have known that? What did she mean we were the same?
一緒、同じ。あなたもなる。
The girl was standing before me had skin of the purest white, yet that beauty was irrevocably tarnished by a violent streak of crimson across her neck. I almost wanted to believe there was some sort of necklace, but no, the jagged pattern was unmistakably the scar that a decapitation would create. Looking back on things later, I would be able to say that this was where it all had began. Does my present live up to your expectations, Zarathustra?
Oh,
Oh hell no!
oh, Bukate.
And thus
Bukate.
we met, brought together by him.
God.
Is he him? Or the way to say the superhuman?
L'enfant de la punition, the child of punishment. And I think this is where we're going to cut it off for today because I have some stuff to do. But I think
Okay.
it's a good introduction to the rest of the story. What do you
I
guys?
think it is introduction to the best girl.
Oh, true. Do you guys have any comments they want to make before we cut it off here?
Is there a trope in visual novel that every time you spot a white woman, you get fucked?
I think it is. Yeah.
Nice. It's deep to know.
White women are the harbingers of destruction, as we all know.
Basically. But I mean, shit, he said Zarathustra.
He did say Zarathustra.
He did.
He actually
He
said
did.
it.
He did.
And people are going to be saying Zarathustra a couple times over the course of this novel, so yeah, get ready for that.
But I think if we refer to Zarathustra, and he was kind of wanting to get into the expectations of Zarathustra, I think the one who is closest to this is Shiro, not him.
Right.
But okay.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Wait. Did she actually say expectations of Zarathustra?
Well, she said,
Oh, so
"Does my present live up to your expectations, Zarathustra?"
like, is he the Übermensch? Does Zarathustra? I can only think of the Übermensch, right? It was this book Zarathustra was all about Zarathustra speaking about the Übermensch,
Right.
right? He was like this allegory for Jesus, but instead of spreading the word of God, he spread the word of the superior human,
Right.
the Übermensch.
Well, it brings the question: is one of the characters here being equated with the Übermensch, or is he being equated with Zarathustra, and the other being equated with the Übermensch? Right. There's like this weird dichotomy: who is Zarathustra, who's the observer, and who's the observed, kind of thing.
And who is the man who is
Who's
who
bringing
died
them
in
together?
the first chapter? Yeah, who's the man?
Who
I
is the
forgot
man?
what I was going to say. I forgot.
I forgot. Yeah, it's an intriguing setup, and I think it has all of the themes, has a lot of the imagery that's going to be recurring. It already sets up. Definitely, I think for the next time, I'm hoping that they get into maybe some of the psychological workings of why it is that Ren has this aversion, this phobia of bladed weapons, because it definitely seems like from their use of kind of Jungian language and playing around with like the psychoanalysis thing of trauma generating behavior, then behavior generating trauma, and kind of this vicious cycle, that this is going to be something that they're going to touch on eventually. And I think it's important to keep in mind Shiro's use of archetype, the word archetype, because it is a Jungian term. And just before we go off, because I think this is going to be relevant later, I would rather define this. I don't have it in the Dies Irae study guide. I will copy it over from a different thing that I was making for my own use for for the Xeno games, which are very Jungian. The archetype Jung defines in Volume 9, Part 1 of the Collected Works, which is titled The Archetypes in the Collective Unconscious. Basically, the idea is that all of humanity, individually we have our subconsciouses, but as a species we have a collective subconscious, which are kind of like the things that we can't express and we can't see, but that are common in the psyches of all living people. And within that context, there are things called archetypes, which Jung says is kind of recurring in like all of human philosophy. He says there's references to it in Philo-Judaeus, talking about the Imago Dei. The Irenaeus is talking about God creating the world by copying things from archetypes outside himself. Trismegistus in the Hermetica says that God is an archetypal light. St. Augustine talks about the principal ideas which are not formed but are ultimately contained in divine understanding. And then there's the Platonic idea of the eidos, right? The form and the world of forms, the perfected, like inexpressed, ideal version of things that we construct physical representations of. And so the archetype is this kind of image that exists since the beginning of humanity, that as soon as an active psyche reaches for that image, it interprets and it transforms into something, a symbol that is elaborated on. And so you'll see across human storytelling figures like the hero or the wise old man or the mother goddess. And those are all slightly different interpretations of the same ultimate archetypes. One of them being the trickster that Shido mentioned, where you have people like Hermes in Greek religion, you have Loki in Norse religion, that kind of thing. The trickster god is a recurring archetype. And because this game is talking about eternal recursion and things being the same with different furniture, I would imagine that they would reach into this archetype idea where these people are the same archetype, but with different expressions depending on their environment. But I'll copy some of those notes that I took for the Xeno games over to the DS Irae study guide so that people can look at them. It's very interesting stuff, and it really was very compatible with Eastern religions. The stuff that I was talking about in the theory notes for the prologue, where kind of Hindus and Jains think that every time you're reborn, your Atman, your archetype, right? Your ultimate self is unchanged. It's just the furniture changes and a few things get influenced by your environment. But yeah, this is what I had to say. Just another one last try. Does anybody have anything else to say?
So, in visual novel culture, the archetype for problem, chaos, and destruction is always white women.
White woman is the archetype of destruction.
Yeah. I see.
It is a white angel, you know?
Yeah. Pretty much.
It is a fallen white angel.
Actually, the white and the black are kind of archetypal images themselves, because we have meanings that we associate with them. But anyway, that's for another time. But yeah, this has been DS Irae episode 2 or episode 1, because last episode was episode 0. And hopefully we're gonna be able to record episode 2 sometime soon. But yeah, goodbye.